Good afternoon. I should open with a comment. That's not a contradiction. I was introduced as being from the Ministry of the Interior in Israel, and here it says Ministry of Finance, and that's because in the time between which I submitted the paper and the time I'm presenting it, the Planning Administration moved from the Ministry of the Interior to the Ministry of Finance. The current Minister of Finance took the position, or took the job, on the condition that he get the Planning Administration, that being that there's a housing crisis going on in Israel, as in many other places, I understand, but it's related to the high cost of housing and the population's ability to afford it. But that's really not connected to my topic, so I will go to the subject at hand. This, I suspect, will be a different sort of presentation. I would like, or I will try to submit a spiritual dimension to a discussion that till now has been somewhat technical, economic, and has contained statistics. And my intentions now are different. I'll start by defining, because it became apparent to me that it wasn't clear to everyone. I'll start by defining what is the Sabbath, and then what is the Sabbath elevator. So first of all, the Sabbath is a day of rest. It's mandated in the Bible. The commandment to keep the Sabbath of a day of rest appears many times in the Bible. Observant Jews and Seventh-day Adventist Christians refrain from acts of creative labor from sunset on Friday until sundown on Saturday, and similarly on certain holidays. Jewish law prescribes an intricate set of rules regarding which activities may be performed and which are prohibited. Operating electric switches is among the prohibited actions. Accordingly, persons who strictly observe the Sabbath would appear to be restricted or excluded from living on the upper floors of tall buildings or participating in activities in multi-floor public buildings. This situation has widespread implications as to where such persons can live and their full integration into society. The solution, which has been emerging or evolving for more than 50 years, is the Sabbath elevator. And what is the Sabbath elevator? It's an elevator that is programmed in advance and stops automatically on the various floors. There's an indicator that it's operating in the Sabbath mode, and it stops at each floor, or it alternating floors, or it goes up to the top floor and stops at floors going down. It typically can be found in areas, in Israel and in other countries with large Jewish populations. And the basic approach of using technological solutions for the Sabbath prohibitions has been around for a long time. It's based on earlier sources which preceded the use of electricity. So here you see clock timers, and they're typically used in the homes of Sabbath observers to warm their food, to control the air conditioning and heating, and so on. And now they're also used to control the elevator, except that the elevator involves far more complicated modifications that are needed. I should say or introduce that it's permitted to start an action or a labor prior to the Sabbath, even though that action may be completed on the Sabbath. When work is done by itself on the Sabbath, there is no prohibition barring benefiting from that work, and that's the thinking behind the Sabbath elevator. But being transported in an enclosed chair carried by others conflicts with the spirit of the Sabbath. So we wouldn't want other people operating the elevator on our behalf. Another aspect of that is that in certain places and in certain communities, there was a non-Jew, in other words, someone not obligated by the rules of the Sabbath, who would operate the elevator on behalf of the observant people. This was even found in some synagogues and in catering halls and the like. But this actually is a less desirable solution than the Sabbath elevator, because in these instances, the non-Jew doing the work is doing it on behalf of the Sabbath observer. Building codes and regulations, among other things, or in addition to promoting public health, safety, and welfare, also try to meet the needs of special populations, persons with disability, children, elderly, nursing mothers and infants. In India, I'm told that there are even considerations that apply to winds or spirits and directions. And in Israel, Sabbath observers. And so the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, in 2001, amended the planning and building law and required that in all new buildings, in all new residential and public buildings with more than one elevator, one of the elevators must be equipped so that it can operate as a Sabbath elevator. The actual operation, whether it operates in the Sabbath mode, depends on the residents. In other words, if a majority of the residents in the building wish it to be the case, then in fact, it will be carried out. In addition, those people, and there are additional costs related to the operation of the elevator as a Sabbath elevator, both in terms of the electricity consumed and also to the wear and tear on the elevator. So the persons requesting it or benefiting from it will bear the additional costs. Now, public buildings are required to meet the Sabbath elevator stipulation, and here are the buildings that must meet that requirement. And that in large measure, that's hotels and guest houses, and that's been around for a long time. But hospitals and other public buildings are required to have the Sabbath elevator, or their elevators that will operate in the Sabbath mode. Now, there are a number of issues about Sabbath elevators in tall buildings. Stopping it, and particularly, in other words, I said the solution has been around, or the approach has been around for some 50 years, but as buildings get taller, some of these issues become more daunting. Stopping at each floor of the building can be a serious inconvenience. Sabbath observers and non-observers living in the same building have different preferences and priorities. And even when you have a Sabbath elevator, religious Jews prefer not to be totally dependent upon the Sabbath elevator. What happens if it breaks down or is not in operation, or if there's a power outage, and therefore they may choose to live on lower floors. Now, a Sabbath elevator doesn't have to be a new elevator. Existing elevators can be adapted to operate as Sabbath elevators. And what's going on now in Israel is a boom in tall buildings. Among other things, is evidenced by the large participation of Israeli representatives, particularly architects, in this conference, because there is a lot of tall building going on, and a lot of tall residential buildings being built, and therefore the applicability of the Sabbath elevator requirements. So Israel is growing up. Tall building. Israel is one of the most densely populated, or is rapidly becoming one of the most densely populated countries in the world, except for a few city-states. And as we grow up, we also seek solutions to accommodating the high density and to preserving open space, and tall buildings are a solution to that. So here are several new tall buildings, and in Tel Aviv in particular, or the Tel Aviv metropolitan area, many new tall buildings. But new elevators, right, are also an issue and an adaptation to existing buildings. And this is significant in terms of urban rehabilitation. Existing buildings tend to have older residents, and we have also, I should say, adding an elevator to an existing building without an elevator substantially increases the value of the building. And in Israel, we have a program. There is concern about adapting or preparing for a possible earthquake. We are in an area of moderate seismicity, and it's anticipated that there will be earthquakes in Israel. And so therefore, a program has been undertaken to strengthen existing buildings. In order to strengthen existing buildings and without substantial government subsidy or participation, the government is proposing or giving additional building rights for existing buildings if they are strengthened for earthquake resistant. So here's a building before, voila, it works, and the new provisions allow for adding up to 2.5 stories to an existing building. And yes, it's additional weight, but if done properly, it can actually strengthen the building. And these are instances in which, because we've added stories, even if there wasn't an elevator before, there certainly needs to be one now, and it's relevant to the Sabbath elevator provision. Now, even if it's only one elevator, but if the residents want it, then they should be able to get it. And so we have a variety of buildings in different places where the National Outline Plan for strengthening existing buildings is taking place. They are adding stories, they're adding additional space, and they're also adding elevators. These are all instances, or these happen to be in Tel Aviv or the Tel Aviv area, but these buildings have all added elevators. You can see a building plan and the existing building and the addition of additional space and additional elevators. In the best instances, they manage to incorporate the elevator in an existing building when they can put it in the core of the building. That isn't always possible, and sometimes it's done as additional space on the exterior of the building. Okay, I should qualify this discussion of the Sabbath elevator by saying that first and foremost is life safety. And so in instances in which there are matters of first responders and emergencies or the need to evacuate the building, then the Sabbath elevator provisions are cast aside. The emergency responders should operate the elevator in the fire service mode, and people evacuating the building, first of all, shouldn't use the elevator, but if they're certainly in a fire. But in other instances in which they need to evacuate the building quickly, they should not wait for the Sabbath elevator, but should go down in the fastest way possible. And emerging issues. So as I said before, tall buildings present particular problems or issues to be dealt with with the Sabbath elevator. Time to destination, and obviously stopping the elevator at each floor, that matters more even than the travel time of the elevator itself. But we have solutions to that. In other words, we can stop it all, or it's already being done. We can stop at alternative floors. We can go to the top and then only stop on the way down. We also, in very tall buildings, as was mentioned previously in a previous presentation, we can have elevators that go to intermediate floors and then switch to another elevator. I would call that the express and the local in very tall buildings. And also digital technology enables us to to reach solutions with the Sabbath elevator that previously were less possible. A Sabbath elevator could operate only as part of the time. In general, it's not feasible to operate the Sabbath elevator through the entire Sabbath for the 25 hours approximately, but rather at certain times when the elevator is most in use. But now we can more precisely do it, and we could even have the elevator operate only as a certain portion of each hour. That could accommodate both Sabbath observers and non-Sabbath observers. There's an instance in New York in which Touro College University, under Jewish auspices, sought to put in a Sabbath elevator to a residence hall, except it was an existing building, and the existing residents who were still in the building went to court and objected because the introduction of the Sabbath elevator increased their travel time when using the elevator. The court found in their favor. It's currently under appeal. The ultimate outcome is as of yet unknown. But there are issues here in terms of travel time, but with both with technology and with preparedness to address these issues, to accommodate or be neighborly, these things can be realized. The reliability and safety of the elevator obviously are increasing and have increased over time. No one said it yet, so I'll say it. Elevator travel is the safest form of transportation, and it's only getting better all the time. Having said that, we always have the option to take the stairs. That may be less of a solution to very tall buildings. But I did want to say that here, this is an instance, or my conclusion here is, that tall buildings present distinct and perhaps unusual challenges to the Sabbath observer. It might appear that religious precepts and modern urban living are in conflict. In fact, however, Jewish law has been evolving and has consistently employed technology to overcome challenges to religious observance. Meeting these challenges requires extensive knowledge and understanding of both religious law and precedent, as well as technology. Neither side of this equation can be treated lightly or implemented without careful consideration. The Sabbath elevator and its adaptation to tall buildings is the successful meeting of such a challenge. Thank you.